Thank you for joining us for this session on safe spaces. But before we begin our conversations, let me briefly introduce you to our viewers. So, Sanah, you are an advocate and an educator. You practiced as an advocate for a few years. However, for the love of education, you decided to enter into academia. You currently teach legal studies at Bloom Public School, and you are the legal advisor for the school. As a legal advisor, you advise and assist the school on various issues such as employment matters, labor concerns, compliances, student safety, communication with governmental authorities, amongst many others. Further, in your capacity as the legal advisor, you conduct teacher training on various child protection laws and legal awareness programs for students.
Yes, I believe so. Yes, I think having a safe space today, I'm confident to say that yes, I do. So for me, safety is not just physical safety. I think it's also emotional. It's so many factors. Having stable relationships, having a career, or even if it's not a career, I think a direction in which you want to move. Like you said, that I made certain decisions, very early on into my career to suddenly from being a full-on advocate running around in the high court to getting into academia was quite a big transition for me. But I found my calling and it sort of just fit in. So for me, safety is not just physical. It's my relationships, it's friendships with people, it's having my friends around, and just working on yourself as a human being. I think understanding your space, your privacy as well, these factors contribute a lot to safety. So equality and how today I understand it and how today I apply it in my teachings, or how if I'm teaching a certain concept, how I include it with equality is so for me when I teach, I can only explain this with an example. When I teach fundamental rights to the children, right, as part of the constitutional mandate. So Article 14 of our Constitution, which everyone is aware of, which is equality, which is equal protection of the law and equality before the law. And to a layman person, it would be, okay, the law treats everybody the same. If you go to court, no matter who you are, when you're approaching the courts or you're approaching justice, the law doesn't discriminate you in any way. But there's another aspect to Article 14 that many people maybe miss out or don't see, which is that there are people who are not the same, but the law also caters to that. So the law also provides for having this is called, in legal terms, you call it reasonable classification, which is that you can have a separate classification of people and the law might treat them differently for various reasons. But the legislation has to follow a certain test to prove it in a court of law that they've followed the principle of equality. So when I teach this, I talk to my kids about differentiated, learning and how people have unique attributes. So for example, even when, like right now, we're making our annual pedagogical plan, which is a plan that you make every session when the school reopens for a new session. So what we're working on now is called individualized education plans, IEP. So the science behind IEP is that there are certain students who have certain special needs, and for these students, IEPs are developed. So I raised a question in our administrative meeting. Why can't we have an IEP for every child? Why is it only if a child has a certain disability or an impairment? Because usually IEPs are for that. So we discussed it at length and we decided, yes, we're going to do this. We're not just going to have an IEP for a child who might have a certain disability. We're going to have an IEP for every child because every child is different. every child learns, comprehends differently. And it's not the grade, it's not the marks that the child brings. But a child, for example, I I prefer talking. I'm a better orator than I am a writer. So maybe if a teacher is speaking to me, I am better at understanding her than if you give me a piece of paper and tell me to read a paragraph. A child might be better at expressing through art rather than writing a paragraph. So I believe that every child is different. So this is how today we are including the concept of equality in our education system at Bloom by making an IEP and having a separate, individualized, personalized education plan for every child. So there isn't a set of behavioral indicators I give to my teacher that, oh, you have to look out for XYZ, because I couldn't possibly make an exhaustive list of it. But the basic behavioral changes. So we look out for any physical indicators, any marks, any hurt, sorry, hurt, any anything that you can see physically. We look out for the changes in the attitude of the child. So, like I said previously, whether the child has maybe become aggressive or has become too quiet, because it can be extremes. Any child can behave differently. So we look out for changes in attitude. We look out for changes with how the child is behaving with their peers, with their friends, with the teacher. Is the child doesn't want to go out for a games period, doesn't want to eat. Eating is a very big, how is the child behaving with the food? Is the child not eating? How is it? So all of these are behavioral indicators. So there can be so many. It can be it can be your friendships with with the child, with their peers, with the teacher, not coming to school. Maybe the child stops coming to school. Maybe the child doesn't want to go back in the bus. Maybe the child doesn't want to go back in the private car. It's so many things. So POXO also very elaborately defines what all are considered as sexual offenses under the law, and the law is very clear on whether it is. So it talks about sexual assault, it talks about penetration, it talks about various other aspects. So the law very clearly defines what all amounts to sexual abuse with a child, and it very clearly identifies the punishments, it very clearly identifies the responsibilities on people for reporting. This is one of the most important aspects that we do trainings on: how to report, when to report, what is the liability on you when you report, who should you report to, because
So
a lot of time
what is the
so
liability when you report?
so the liability, if you are in the knowledge, or have even, you might not have seen it, you might not have it not happened in front of you, but the minute you possess the knowledge of any certain sexual violence, you have to report it. It's, I think, under section 18 or 19, it's there. So the minute you have the knowledge, you have to report. So a lot of time people are very scared to report. And this is when we tell our teachers, you don't need to decide what is happening to the child. Just come and speak out. Come to your senior. We also have, all schools are supposed to have a POXO cell, which is the committee that is formed, where you have the principal and you have the school counselor, etc., etc. This is all given by the circulars by the Director of Education. So we also have a POSH committee. We also have a POXO committee. These committees meet regularly through the year. They also take on, so all of these trainings, these awareness seminars, etc., are organized by these committees. But these committees are also responsible and are there as where you can come and voice out your concern. And there are also many portals on, sorry, you can also go and file a complaint online. You can directly go to the police station. All avenues are available to people. So we do in my trainings, we talk about reporting, and we make our teachers feel comfortable by letting them know that if you're speaking out, it's all right. You're doing something which is brilliant, and you're complying with the law, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Because a lot of times people are very afraid to speak out. They feel like, oh, I don't know what's going on. And a lot of times people form assumptions. Oh, this couldn't happen. I know the parent, or I know this person, or I know this family. This couldn't happen. A lot of people have assumptions about situations. So the two things we do is, do not assume. You do not know what happens within the four walls of another family. Do not have any preconceived notions about the child or the family or of the situation. And do not think that anyone is going to judge you or is going to label you, or that you are under the radar now. All you need to do is come and talk to the senior management, and then whatever course has to be followed will be followed. So we at
Brilliant.
least must put our teachers at ease, because teachers are such an integral part of a child's life. I cannot emphasize this more. So, Smita, I believe the denial and there's a big taboo and a big stigma around sexual violence, whether it's with children, adults, with anybody. And as a society, we are now growing into, like I said, our children are now very vocal. They're speaking up a lot more than they did previously. But one is, so every awareness and everything begins at home. Home is where any person has the safety, it's your safety net. Your home is your environment, it's your safety net. So the number one thing and the only way to combat denial, hesitation, fear is by opening up communication lines within your own home. Parents must be willing to talk to their children about certain aspects that are not comfortable. And in our setup, I don't think many people do that. So communication amongst parents and their children must be more open. Parents are it's the first stepping stone. And then comes the school, the teachers. Even when we talk about certain aspects like this in school, we must be able to have open conversations. So we do a lot of workshops on gender sensitivity as well, and talking about the gender. So the only way to help and to deal with this, the stigma of shame and the ignorance and the denial, is to open up communication lines amongst all stakeholders: parents, children, schools, teachers, anyone that is involved in the child's life must work together. That is the only way we will be able to ensure that the child speaks up. That is the only way we will be able to ensure that there is no fear instilled in the child to speak up, if the stakeholders talk openly. Because a lot of times we see stakeholders are not always at par. Parents have their own, style of doing things, which is respected. Teachers have their own style of doing things, which is respected. So I feel like there's a communication gap. And the minute there's a communication gap and everyone has to, what is the overall goal? The overall goal is the welfare of the child. So if the overall goal and the common goal is the same, the interest is shared, then everyone must talk together and have these open conversations. I think that's the only way. So whether it happens in economically weaker sections or in affluent parts of affluent families or elite families, I think is a misconception. I would not categorize that it only happens in AWS and does not. I think this is a myth, and I think this is very misunderstood. It can happen anywhere. It can happen. There are so many dynamics in which violence takes place. Whether it is the way, why do we have posh, going back to this, and I mean, Sakshi has such a phenomenal role to play in coming out of posh, because and of the Vishaka guidelines. I mean, there was a void and there was a lacuna in our law, and uh, till 2012-13 we didn't have a law on how to protect women in the workplace. So that that only came out in the open when Vishaka happened, when the case took place, and then when we got posh. So violence can take place anywhere, in any dynamic, in any relationship. So posh focuses more on levels of authority, senior superior relationships, power dynamics, etc. POXO as well. I do not believe that from all the case studies that we have read and the coming out of the POXO law, I think this is a misconception that it only happens in certain types of families or households and it doesn't happen in the other. I think if it doesn't, and if that is a myth, then it's only there because it's not being talked about. It's only there because people are not speaking up about it. I would go to the police station directly. I do not, and I'm not talking as an educator. I'm not talking about as an advocate. I'm just talking as another person.
Yes.
Even if it's
As
happening
a bystander. As a
as
bystander.
an individual, if I believe that there is any concern, it is my duty as a citizen today. Forget about being an educator, forget about being a woman, forget about being an advocate, none of that matters. I would report it and I would let the law take its course because I believe it is my duty to report. Why should I take it in my own hands? Why should, like I said, why should I form an opinion? It's not my place to know what is happening with somebody else, but it is my place to watch out for the other person as a concerned citizen, one on one, as a responsible citizen. So
Brilliant.
I would report, yes. So the impact of child sexual abuse is, so I think we all have started talking about it much more recently. And it was not talked about for a very long time. I remember when we were in law school and when we started studying all these laws is when I first came across this. And this is as early as 2013. I passed out in 2016. So that's when I was suddenly, I got to know about these laws and I started reading in the newspaper and the social media was started blowing up. So I think it's only in the past 5 to 10 years is when we really started talking about it. It's always been there. So suddenly it feels like, oh my God, it's there. But no, it's always been there. Sexual abuse, whether it's in relation to a child or in relation to anybody else, is there. It's happening, it's prevalent, but we're talking about it right now. So the impact of this is, it's huge because when a person goes through any form of violence, any form, it has, an emotional and a psychological effect on the person. And I also believe that we do not properly provide for rehabilitation of a person who undergoes any form of violence, even though, yes, we have mechanisms in place, etc., etc. Again, I believe that the only way we can deal with the stigma attached with this is to talk about it openly. There is no shame. You haven't done anything wrong. If people always feel, oh my God, I have done something wrong, or why is this happening to me? So the only way we will be able to, because what happens is, I I now you these sort of things impact a child in so many ways. And later on, when the child is grown up, suddenly at the back of their mind this will be there. So to avoid these later effects, and for it to not impact your life and not to define who you are, you need to be able to talk about it and get the support. So support systems, your families, your friends have to be very vocal, have to be, all the stakeholders really need to get together. That's the only thing that I can say. So, I mean, again, if it would completely depend on how aware that sister is, and how her next step, what she would do, has many contributing factors. How aware is she? How open is the family that she is in? How are the parents? What is the relationship between the sister and brother? What is the relationship between the parents and the children? So, to determine what she would do next, which is, would she go to the parents? Would she go to the person who has committed the violence? Would she directly approach the police station and the authorities? Is very difficult to determine, because I believe it has many contributing factors. So I think she should be, I mean, the ideal situation, if you're asking me, is to definitely speak with the parents, because maybe I would think that she would be too scared, and it seems like they were quite young, and the ages, she's not a grown up, like an adult, and directly think, wants to take the situation in her own hands. So I think the first thing she should or ought to have done is to talk to the parents. But then again, when my mind goes there, I have a follow up question. What are the parents going to do? What if the parents are very conservative? What if the parents are not do not want to take the matter further? Because the sister has done what she felt was right, and she spoke about it. And she spoke about it with her parents, who she believes is the authority, who believes, in her head, she's going to the parent as a, this is what has happened, now you help because you're the adult. But then my follow up question would be, are the parents going to take this matter? Are they going to report it? Because maybe a family member is involved, an uncle or something or the other, so they don't want that stigma to be attached to the family. Can she directly approach the police station? She's a young girl. How would she feel doing that? Who can she speak with? So there's so many concerns. You see, like, this is the problem. This is why I say everything starts at home. Parents have to build an environment in their homes where their kids can speak openly about what they are feeling. That is the only way we can ensure that our kids are growing up in a safe and a secure environment. I think my commitment to making safe spaces is to continue my endeavor for spreading awareness about our laws, and to ensure that wherever I am, whoever I am speaking with, whichever audience I am addressing as an advocate and as an educator, I believe it is my, not only my professional duty, but my moral duty to make them aware of their rights, and to provide an environment, at least, I mean, I can only speak for my school and I can only speak for my classroom. I must ensure that I create an environment where my kids feel like they can speak up. It doesn't have to be right, it doesn't have to be wrong, it doesn't, they just should be able to speak up. Only when we address concerns that our children have and the questions that they have is when they will be more confident. We have to build, this is how you build character. This is how you work on confidence of a child, by letting him or her ask questions. It doesn't have to be right, it doesn't have to be wrong, but just let them ask. And it's not necessary that you have the right answer all the time. Sexually, I am happy. Everyone is unique. My home. I'm a Rakshan. Rakshan.
Rakshan.
Rakshan.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Sana. Thank you so much
Thank
once
you
again.
so much. Thank you so much. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have had this interaction. Thank you.